So, what does it really take to get to the very, very top of professional wrestling? Is it some quick, explosive rise to fame, or is it a long, hard fought journey? Well, if you dig into the history books, you'll see the answer. It's not a straight line, not even close. The blueprints for building a champion, they're way more varied and fascinating than you'd ever guess.
All right, let's start with the data. On average, how long does it take for a superstar to go from their WWE debut to winning the heavyweight championship? Well, the number is 4 years and 7 months. I mean, just think about that. That's a long time to be fighting, traveling, and just clawing your way up that ladder. But, averages can be kind of misleading. The real story, that's always in the extremes.
And yeah, this slide really lays out those two extremes perfectly. On one side, you've got the phenoms, guys like Brock Lesnar and Yokozuna, who were basically strapped to a rocket and sent straight to the top. Then, on the other side, you've got the journeymen. These are legends like Ric Flair and Jeff Hardy, who spent years, sometimes decades, proving themselves before finally grabbing that brass ring. So you see, two totally different paths to get to the exact same place. But what if there's a path that's completely off the map?
Yeah, to understand that, we need to forget the statistics for a second and just focus on the story of one man. A man whose journey to the top didn't start in a wrestling ring or a gym or anything like that. It started with simply trying to survive. This is the story of Bruno Sammartino.
You see, long before he was ever a champion, Bruno was just a little boy in Pizzaferrato, Italy, right in the middle of World War II. When Nazi forces took over his village, his mother, Amelia, did the only thing she could. She grabbed him and his siblings and fled, hiding out on this desolate mountain called Valle Rocca, just trying to stay alive. And the hardship they went through, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. 4 of his siblings died when they were kids. The family had to survive these brutal winters by eating snow, of all things. Bruno himself got so sick with rheumatic fever, he was practically on his deathbed. At one point, they were even lined up in front of a Nazi firing squad and were rescued at the very last second. Honestly, the fact that he even survived the war is a miracle in itself.
So when the family finally made it over to Pittsburgh in 1950, Bruno wasn't some future powerhouse. He was just a shell of a kid. He weighed only 85 pounds. He was super weak from being so sick. He couldn't speak a word of English, and of course, he was bullied like crazy. But all that torment, it ended up being the spark for one of the most incredible transformations in the history of sports. And what I love about this is just the sheer contrast. I mean, look at this. On the left, you see the boy who showed up in America. And on the right, the man he forced himself to become. He went from a sickly 85-pound kid to 265 pounds of pure muscle, from being a target for bullies to becoming one of the strongest men on the entire planet. And here it is, right from the man himself. When Bruno found weightlifting, it wasn't just a hobby, it was a calling. He said he felt this instant, deep connection to it. This was the tool that was going to let him rebuild himself. And not just his body, but his mind too. So just how strong did he get? Well, in 1959, he set a world record by bench pressing 565 pounds. And listen, this wasn't with all the modern techniques we have today. This was just raw, pure strength. No reps, no bouncing the bar off his chest. He was a legitimate world-class strongman. And the world of wrestling was about to find that out real quick. Okay, so you have this guy with unbelievable raw power and a backstory you just can't make up. Of course he became an instant star. But nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted just how fast he would get to the very top. So get this, he makes his pro debut in '59. By 1960, he's already in Madison Square Garden. He goes up to Canada for a bit, hones his craft, and then he gets the call. On May 17, 1963, just under 4 years after his very first match, he's challenging the flashy champion, Buddy Rogers. The match itself is the stuff of legend. The bell rings, and there's no messing around, no feeling out process. Bruno just rushes Rogers like a bull, body slams him with this incredible force, and then immediately locks him in a brutal backbreaker. Rogers had absolutely no answer for it. And it was over in 48 seconds. Just think about that for a second. We started with an average of 4 years and 7 months. This was 48 seconds. In less time than it takes to make a pot of coffee, Bruno Sammartino had made the champion give up and had become the new face of the entire company. It was less of a match and more of a demolition. But here's the crazy part. Winning the title was just the beginning. What came next wasn't just a championship run. It was the start of an entire era, one that was defined by numbers that are, well, they're just staggering. And they'll probably never, ever be broken. And here's the main takeaway, the thing you have to remember. Bruno Sammartino's first reign as champion is to this day the longest in the history of the company. It's the benchmark. It's the standard that every single champion since has been measured against. Just let that number sink in. 2,803 consecutive days as champion. That's 7 years, 8 months, and 1 day. It's an unbreakable, untouchable record of sheer dominance. And that was only his first reign. If you combine his 2 runs with the title, Bruno Sammartino was the heavyweight champion for a grand total of over 4,000 days. That's more than 11 years at the absolute top of the industry. It's just mind-boggling. And his dominance wasn't just what he did in the ring. It was what he did at the box office. He sold out Madison Square Garden 188 times. The place literally became known as the house that Bruno built. He wasn't just a champion, he was an economic engine. Okay, so let's circle all the way back. We started with the data, we've gone through Bruno's incredible story. So what does it all mean? Well, it shows us that there isn't just one single blueprint for becoming a champion. There are actually a few different ways to do it. In fact, when you look at all the evidence, you start to see these 3 distinct patterns pop up. These are basically the 3 main blueprints, the archetypes that almost every single heavyweight champion in history falls into one way or another. So first, you've got the phenom. These are your can't-miss prospects, right? Guys like Brock Lesnar or Yokozuna who are clearly destined for greatness and got pushed into the main event almost immediately. Second, there's the journeymen. These are the grinders, the guys like Jeff Hardy or Ric Flair, who spent years in the trenches paying their dues before they finally reached the top. And then you have the third and the rarest archetype, the living legend, the benchmark, a run of dominance so complete that it defines an entire generation. And there is only one name in that category, Bruno Sammartino. Which really brings us to our final thought here. Bruno's story was forged in incredible hardship, and his reign was built on a kind of longevity we just don't see anymore. So in our modern world of constant content, 24/7 news cycles, and rapid turnover, is it even possible to create a champion with that kind of foundation, that kind of staying power? Could a legend like Bruno ever be built again? It's something to think about.